Hello everyone, I am Ningding, the thesis coordinator. Welcome to watch this video clip. This indicates you're approaching to the last stage of your master thesis, and you are wrapping up your thesis and preparing for the submission. In today's video, I will present how to write the last chapters, such as conclusion and the discussion part, and also the recommendation chapter. And after that, I will caution you some points that deserve your extra attention. And then it's the time for you to submit your final thesis. First, let's start from the conclusion and the discussion chapters. Some students are a bit confused. What is the difference between findings chapter and conclusion chapter? Let's first look at chapter 4, findings. In this chapter, we only focus on factual information, and we are going to answer the sub-research questions using the data we collected one by one. And in this chapter, you can have a summary section to summarize, or let's say to echo or answer the main research question. I will present you an example, such as this example. I have 3 independent variables: corporate reputation, CSR motives, green advertising. And I also have a dependent variable, purchase intention. And I formulate 3 hypotheses. I present that in the conceptual model part before the methodology. Now in the findings part, I use statistical analysis to test the relationship between each independent variable and dependent variable one by one. And these are aligned with my sub-research questions or with my hypothesis, H1, H2, and H3. And I know that H1 shows no significant relationship and it's very weak, R equals to 0.06. And I use a dot line to show that these 2 variables are very weakly related and even not significant. And the second, H2, the relationship is relatively strong and it is significant. So I use a solid line and a little bit thick to indicate that there exists a strong relationship between these 2 variables, CSR motives and purchase intention. And the third hypothesis is a moderate relationship but significant. And H3 use a solid line and a little bit thin to show that green advertising is moderately and also significantly related to the purchase intention. I use such kind of visualization to echo my conceptual model, but with actual analysis results. And I use dot line, solid line, thick line, and thin line to distinguish the analysis results. And in the conclusion chapter, we will go beyond that. We will not only discuss the factual information, but first we will restate our research objective and main research question. And we will restate our major findings briefly. And after that, we will present what is the significance of our research. In other words, why these findings are meaningful for business practices. And I also need to echo the literature review. In the literature review part, we present what previous researchers have found. And now it's the time for me to reflect on my own findings, whether my findings are in line with the previous research or are conflicting the previous findings, and why. And I try to connect it to the research context. And I have such kind of findings, and why did it happen? Because in the current organization or in the current country, that the research context is quite different as previous research. I also need to reflect on the limitation of my research in the discussion part. No research is perfect. Every research has this and that problem that I can improve, or in the future, other researchers, when they replicate the same study, they can pay attention to it. So I will provide suggestions for the future research. What we should avoid to do in the conclusion and discussion chapters is, please do not introduce new arguments. And you should also not introduce new data. We frequently see that students in the conclusion and discussion chapter, they say, okay, during my primary data collection, such as interview or questionnaire survey, I have observed this and that things. Well, such kind of informal observations can be used as kind of supplementary argument, but they should not be used as new argument to propose new ideas. And don't forget that you should reflect on the main findings. Some students only focus on what can be done in the future, but they overlook what their main findings are. Or sometimes they focus too much on the sub-research questions instead of to make it to synthesize them together into a complete story to echo the main research question. And very frequently we find that in the conclusion and discussion chapters, students never reflect on the literature review. It looks like the literature review has a disconnection with the conclusion and the discussion part. A very easy way to check it is to see how many references you have it in the conclusion and the discussion chapter. If you don't have references, that's more or less indicate that you forget to link to the literature review. In the last chapter, recommendation part, we should only provide evidence-based tips. So don't use your own feelings or common sense as the recommendations. Every tips you provide should be based on the findings you get from your primary data collection. And let's look at this example of my findings again. What do the business practitioners prefer to see in the recommendation chapter? They like to see kind of priority list. For example, for corporate reputation, CSR motifs, and green advertising, we have known that H2 has the strongest relationship. After that is green advertising. While corporate reputation is not that important in my research. So on the priority list, I will put CSR motifs on the top one. While after that is the green advertising. And the business practitioners, they also would like to see, for example, kind of action plan. In the coming years, how can they take an action? And what is the short-term action? What is the long-term action? And when they can see the profit back. You can also draft a financial plan. Suppose I have certain amount of investment. And from such kind of findings, I can decide that the most proportion of my investment should go to the CSR motifs. And part of them go to green advertising. While corporate reputation is not that important at this moment, so I can save my money, don't invest on it. You can draft such kind of financial plan for that. Now, it's the time for you to wrap up your thesis. The first thing is to check your language, whether you are using the academic English to write your report. And don't forget to check the plagiarism part, because when you upload your thesis onto OnStage, the plagiarism check will automatically be on. And if it exceeds certain amounts, your thesis will be forwarded to the exam board for a further check. And don't forget the word count, and this needs to be printed on the cover page. The word count only refers to all the words in the main body of your thesis. In other words, it's from the introduction chapter to the recommendation chapter. All the words in the tables, figures, reference, and appendices will not be taken into account when you count your words. You also need to check the layout. Every chapter needs to start from a new page. And all the spaces between the lines, between the paragraphs, needs to be consistent. The reference check is also important. The APA reference style needs to be applied. And look at your appendices. Don't ignore the importance of appendices. Every appendix should be named or referred in the main body. They should not be listed in the appendices isolatedly. All the tables and the figures should be named and numbered and should be put on the right place of the report. And all the tables and figures should be referred in the context. For example, figure 1.2. Then in the text, I should see such kind of sentence. Table 1.2 shows what kind of things. And try to avoid using table below or figure above shows what. Because after checking the layout, perhaps it's no longer below but on the other page. So the formal way is to give every table and a figure a number, like 1.2, 1.1. Now it's the time for you to submit your thesis. Stick to the deadline and use OnStage to submit it. And we wish you a great success, and we look forward to seeing you in the final defense.